Hello, viewers, and welcome to our very first episode of Movies in Black and White, where we're just going to introduce ourselves a little bit in the podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Holmes.
I am your co-host, Raf Stitt,
Raf brings the racial insights.
and Jacob brings the white privilege.
We obviously planned that out. Yes, welcome to Movies in Black and White. Thank you for tuning in. Obviously, probably most people early on are going to know us from Screen Age Wasteland in some way. This is not related to Screen Age Wasteland, but specifically Raph. People will probably recognize Raph as the host of the Canon Pod. He's done, I don't even know how many episodes of that show at this point. I know I've been on like at least five or six myself as a guest. Also, Raph is either a guest or a co-host on the Pole Position podcast that we've done twice, to be decided, but he's there. And I'm your host of Pole Position. I write Pole Position for Screen Age Wasteland, covering the Oscars. Um, but we've been talking for quite a little bit about this idea of movies in black and white and addressing race in film. And the conversation I think that we've had, Raf, is how do you attack that? It's like a really big topic. Um, of
Big
how do you
question.
even go about like structuring the podcast? Like, what does that look like? Are we just going to talk about individual films? Are we going to talk about overarching themes and just kind of how does that look? And so we've been gearing that up for you guys, and I think we have some interesting takes lined up for this first season. Um, yeah. So, but I wanted to give a little introduction to our backgrounds and everything too first, because I think there's some interesting stuff to dig into there as well and just kind of get to know us. I mean, so Raf, I know you grew up basically in NYC or around NYC. What is your
hmm
life like there in NYC, and what's your kind of background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am first and foremost a lifelong movie fan, but maybe firster and foremoster, I am a lifelong black guy. So I grew up in outside of New York City in like an extremely diverse uh, place. Like I went to school, elementary school through high school with people from all different backgrounds. So, you know, I think I've always been sort of sensitive to ideas around race, culture, identity, and those things. And also, being someone who really loves film, trying to understand how those two things relate or how race, identity, culture, and things like that sort of make themselves apparent within film. But growing up in New York, having the parents that I have, who are like have always been extremely socially conscious and have like passed that on to me and my siblings. This has always been something that I've been extremely interested in and really love talking about. Sometimes to the point where people don't want to talk to me at weddings or parties or whatever it may be because they're like, that guy just can't stop talking about race relations in movies, and we're just trying to have a couple cocktails and he's being a little weird. So that's kind of where I'm approaching it from. Really have always been interested in these things, and I'm really excited, Jacob, that you have offered a place for us to talk about these things.
Yeah, I mean, and Raph is saying that because technically, movies in black and white was my idea, and I approached him about it. But we're equal co-hosts. um, Raph, I wanted to kind of, this might be a taboo
There's
question.
a joke in there somewhere that we probably shouldn't make in terms of equality, how much your vote counts versus my vote counts as co-host. But we'll save that for a later episode.
And my hope is that this is a bit of a safe space, because this is a question that, depending on the circumstances, could be kind of taboo. But I think in this space, it's kind of reasonable to ask. So obviously, Raph, I've known for a while that you're black, but the do you know a little anything about your heritage of like? anything where your ancestors come from. Obviously, there's a lot of different um, backgrounds for people who are black or brown, and just curious if you
Yeah,
have any of that.
abs- absolutely. That's a great question. I think this is a great place to jump off. So I'm half black and half Dominican. My mom is, well, technically she immigrated here when she was like 9 or 10. So I'm half first generation on my mom's side. On my dad's side, he's Black American. He grew up in Harlem, but his family has roots in the Carolinas. So we had a ton of family in the Carolinas. So like the whole slavery thing was kind of weird, where like entire generations of family history and ethnic backgrounds and things like that were kind of wiped off the face of the earth when slaves were stolen from West Africa and brought over to the States. So we don't actually know like where in West Africa my dad's family is from, or like when exactly the first Stitts came over to the States. But I'm pretty sure the first folks in my family who landed on American soil came in through Charleston, South Carolina, and were unfortunately forced into slavery within the Carolinas, and then eventually some folks made it up north to New York, where my dad's family has had roots for at least I want to say like two generations. So that's kind of like a loose understanding of like where it is that I'm from. It's something that I still want to like dive into deeper. I want to know like my full heritage, like going back to West Africa and all that stuff. A lot of times it's just like again kind of hard because the entire
Because white people.
institution of slavery was like kind of designed to like strip all humanity away from the African slaves that they were bringing over here, which is something that we're going to talk about in episodes to come.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, unfortunately, that's the way it goes for most people who are descendants of slaves. I mean, that's after you get to slavery, then it's hard to trace back past that because of slavery. But that's cool. I didn't know, really about your Dominican side. I mean, I had thoughts that maybe that was something like that, but I didn't know. So that's pretty cool. Um, my
Yeah, the
heritage,
name Raf being short for Raphael and
yeah, yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
super curly hair may have given it away.
Um, my heritage, you know, um, not going to go really too deep into my boring white person heritage. I'm mostly British Irish. That doesn't really matter. Um, apparently, my great, I don't know, someone down the line of Holmes. My name used to be spelled Hoomes, the family name instead of
Hmm.
Hol. And at that time, somehow, I think one of our guys was like a big shot in the Kentucky Derby. Like he brought over a horse from England that
Hmm.
like sired a bunch of Kentucky Derby winners and was like super rich.
Nice.
And then one Holmes out of that group of rich Holmes in Bowling Green branched off and said, "I don't need you and your money," and that's how we came to be middle class Holmes in Alabama. Uh, although
You you
thankfully,
could you could have been heir to this Kentucky Derby, you know, inheritance.
yes,
But
thankfully, I was
I mean,
almost very upset, except for the fact that those folks apparently had really bad spending habits and were about to lose their fortune anyway. So that made me feel a little better. Um, that's really first world problems compared to your lineage. So that's the silliness of trying to go about my heritage and commiserating. So you know, in another way, so I grew up. I live currently and grew up 20 miles north of Montgomery, which people probably will recognize the name of Montgomery is the birthplace of the civil rights movement and the cradle of the Confederacy. Birthplace of the civil rights movement because we were mistreating black folks in Montgomery so badly. But also, thankfully, the uh, heroes of the civil rights movement came a lot from this area because of that treatment. So growing up as a white guy within 20 miles of that has been really interesting. A suburb of Montgomery
Hmm.
that is, mostly, especially compared to probably to NYC. I haven't looked up like demographics, but it's, you know, relatively mostly white. I think we're 60 to 80% white here in Prattville. I spent some time in Troy where it was actually a lot more varied. So I forget sometimes, but
Hmm.
yeah. And also speaking of my heritage, I am a son of a Confederate veteran, not a son of a Confederate veteran, but sons of veterans lineage. I think my
Hmm.
uh, great grandfather served in the Confederate Army. My very Confederate loving grandfather would have been able to tell, but he has since passed. And yeah, my grandfather took me to Sons of Confederate Veterans meetings when I was very young and did not know what in the world was going on. Um, he used to take me as well to the American Legion, and I thought it was a place. I thought it was a restaurant because we only went there to eat. So,
Hmm.
I was very confused at the time. But yeah, when my grandfather passed away, he had very few belongings in a box that I got from him, and one of them was a framed copy of a doctorate, an honorary doctorate degree to Rebel University for Southern Pride,
Nice.
doctorate in Southern Pride, and then he also had framed a pamphlet where there is a about 10 miles north of where I live up the interstate on I-65, there is a Confederate flag, a large Confederate flag that flies over the interstate. And he had a pamphlet from that because he helped contribute to that. So that now I have
Nice.
submitted that to the Alabama Department of Archives and History because I did not know what to do with it once I got it. So there it's a record of who donated to that. Um, so yeah, I come
Yeah.
from a very different background. Also, I mean, like I went to from 6th to 12th grade, I was in a private Christian school that was mostly white. It did start around the time of segregation. Not that that was the intent when I was there in 20
Hmm.
whatever 2010. I graduated in 2012, but I had
Hmm.
a class of like 12, and in my graduating class there was one black girl, and the rest of us were white. And you know, we had it's just a very different atmosphere. It's interesting. We had very this is a little less race. This is less race related, but we did like basically learn that Reagan's economics were perfect. The histories were like
Um,
Reaganomics
you
good.
you say it's not race related, but Reaganomics are also rooted in a lot of racist core beliefs.
I
So
That's
I
why I
think
brought it because before we
that
hopped on, we were talking about some Reagan era things in movies, and that
yeah.
that presentation of that we got was not dealing with race up front in the history books, but we were just pretty much
Mhm.
like Reagan economy good, and John Maynard Keynes was basically presented as like an economic villain or something like he had a bad economic theory. That's
Mhm.
kind of how it was treated. Um, but I say all that just to give some background on where I grew up, and currently though I am a journalist full time. I write. I cover state politics in Alabama, and I have been critical. We still have three Confederate holidays here in Alabama. There was a plan. We finally did pass a bill this last
Holiday's a
session.
holiday, though.
Yeah, I mean, but the last legislative session, we finally did pass a bill to make Juneteenth a state holiday. So we just caught on
Nice.
with that. The previous session, we had a bill to make Juneteenth the state holiday, but you could only choose to pick whether you're going to take off for Juneteenth or Jefferson Davis's birthday. So, um, so that was a very. We have a lot of racist bills come through. We have a lot of. We have a bill right now that is going to make it $5,000 a day if a city removes a Confederate memorial. the state of Alabama has just gotten slapped down by a very conservative Supreme Court for gerrymandering, um, to try and keep there from being
Hmm.
two majority black districts. So we're still fighting a lot of the same things here today. And yeah, and I cover that. I cover a lot of I've covered a lot of white supremacist groups and revealed their problems. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And for me, it's like seeing past a lot of the things that I grew up around. A lot of my family doesn't really see that. They see things this way. I think, my family, my mom probably loves The Blind Side. I haven't asked. We'll talk about The Blind Side later this season. Um, the other day she put on a movie called The Ron Clark Show, and we didn't finish it. Something
Hmm.
else happened, but it's about a white teacher that goes into Harlem, um, starring the guy that played Chandler from Friends. Uh, so
Mm.
it's um,
They probably love Chandler in Harlem though.
I
Chandler
mean,
was Chandler was good in the hood for sure.
and it was apparently like a TV movie, and yeah, I looked at some of the reviews, and some of it was very typical, like white savior stuff, and then some of it was like maybe it had its heart in the right place, but it's still kind of icky. It's still dated and kind of gross in certain ways. So um, but that's where I come. That's where I my stratosphere is very different than New York City. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to start this podcast with Raf, and so that we could kind of talk through
Yeah.
those very different perspectives and look at race in film. Do we want to talk a little bit, Raf, about some of the topics that we are going to look at in season one?
Yeah, but before we do that, I just wanted to thank you for sharing your background. I think that like knowing sort of where the two of us are coming from will make this interesting. Like, right, there's not only the difference in terms of like our racial backgrounds, but also where we grew up geographically, which I think also kind of is going to inform a lot of the conversations that we have in really interesting ways. Like I'm coming from like a like liberal elite city, and you're coming from the birthplace of the civil rights movement, but also the what was it, the cradle of the Confederacy. So like, um, those sort of like lived backgrounds will really sort of make the conversations that we do have like that much more interesting, as opposed to like if you were, a white guy who I grew up with in New York, your perspective would be super different than the perspective that you're bringing. So I do think that, I just wanted to pause on that because I do think that that is something that I appreciate and will appreciate in all these conversations that we have going forward. Speaking of which, some of the conversations that we will be having this season, do we just want to like list through what it is we're going to be talking about, what some of the episodes are going to cover?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. So our first
Sweet.
episode.
So,
Go ahead. All right.
oh, I was
So
just going to read the list because I have it in front of me.
he
But
has a
if
list in
you
front
if
of
you
him.
want to,
I don't have it in front of me. Please go ahead.
so the topics of conversation that we will be discussing within this first season of Movies in Black and White, covering again a bunch of different movies, but exploring these different topics about race in movies. We're going to be talking about interracial relationships in film and how they're depicted. That should be a really interesting conversation. Of course, we're going to be talking about white savior movies because we have to. So, The Blind Side, The Help, Hidden Figures, things like that. Driving Miss Daisy, Green Book, all of our favorites. We're going to be talking hood classics. And by hood classics, we're talking movies by Black auteurs about Black people geared towards Black audiences. We're calling them hood movies because a lot of these movies are about growing up in various hoods across America. So that will be another topic of conversation. And then we're going to be talking more like blackbuster movies, which is like movies by Black auteurs that are for wider general audiences, including white folks and other ethnic groups within America. So think like Jordan Peele, Ryan Coogler. You're thinking like Get Out, Sinners, Black Panther, things like that, where it's definitely about Black people, but like kind of it's not so much geared specifically towards Black audiences. Then we're going to be talking about Black people and propaganda, movies where Black guys or Black people are playing cops, and what all that means for the relationship between the police community and the Black community and how those lines kind of get crossed. And then we're going to be talking about the Oscars being so white because we have to. There's been a lot of controversy over the last couple of years and probably the last like forever about the Oscars and how white they are and things that are being done to change that. And then we're going to have some fun with race swapping. So think about like when it's appropriate to swap races in a movie, and then playing some fun exercises, some like what ifs, swapping the races of different characters in different movies. So that's like general idea of what it is that we're going to be talking about over the course of the season. Jacob, is there anything that I missed or anything that you want to add about any of those topics of conversation?
No, I think you covered that really nicely and succinctly. I'll say that that it came up in my thoughts when we talk about the interracial relationships, and there was one other like race swapping maybe, or one of the other episodes. We're going to focus probably mostly on black and white. So like for instance, white Asian relationships in films, we're probably not going to really. They obviously count as interracial relationships, but they are not what we're
Yeah.
really focused on. What we're really focusing on, because obviously, specifically, black and white relationships have a different connotation given the histories in America, and also just because Raf is black and I'm white, and so we're not really as much geared toward talking about white Asian relationships. That's we're really here to talk about black and white. Um,
Yeah.
so although it's similar
But
to
that'll be the thing with all these episodes. We're going to focus on specifically the relationship between not just like relationship and how we're talking about in the first episode or our next episode, but just like the dynamic between Black Americans and white Americans, as opposed to the dynamics between like white Americans, Black Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, South Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, all that stuff. Just because one, that would be too much to talk about, and two, it's not necessarily our area of expertise, so we don't want to speak out of turn.
right. So Killers of the Flower Moon will probably not be mentioned really in next week's episode about interracial relationships, because while
Yeah,
that's a very interesting movie and very interesting topic, it's not really what we're trying to hit on. Although now West Side Story with your Dominican background, Raf, and New York, I mean, it's kind of
yeah,
it's close.
they are Puerto Rican though.
They're Puerto Rican. Let's see, shame on me.
Yeah,
But,
you.
did you see
It's
Superman, Raf?
I'll have a counter for every time you say something that I can construe as like being casually racist, and then there will be a prize at the end of the season for whoever. If someone can guess closest to the number, we'll go Price's Right rules, closest to the number of times that I tick you off for being casually racist. Then whoever gets closest will win a prize. We'll send them a
Nice.
signed copy from the two of us of Do the Right Thing.
Nice. Clearly, what I was saying was that the Puerto Rican, and Dominican is close enough that maybe you could make a case for covering it. And I'm going to stop talking now. But yeah, no, we've got a lot of
We could also talk about the egregious brown face in that movie. They got a bunch of Greek and Italian dudes pretending to be Puerto Rican guys.
I'm assuming we're talking about the original, which I have not actually seen. I've seen Spielberg's.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm talking about the original. I'm talking about the
Yeah, yeah,
original.
yeah, yeah.
Spielberg did not make that same mistake.
Yes. So, and also, I think there's going to be some interesting things to talk about with race swapping. Obviously, when it comes to race swapping, the things I think of immediately that come to mind are things like Ariel and the Little Mermaid, which is probably the one that got the most attention, worthwhile or not. And then maybe a little less attention, but Nick Fury was one with Samuel L. Jackson
Mhm.
recasting. That's an easy white to black recast. It's most of these are going to be white to black because that's the one that draws the fury of stupid people. And then, but
The Nick
we're gonna
Fury.
address that in an honest way. We're gonna see. We're gonna hear out the concerns, even if I don't have the concerns. I told Raf before we started filming, I want to make sure people understand. I'm not here as like a Charlie Kirk or MAGA type person to be like, "You're wrong. It was awful to race swap Nick Fury because he's a white character and we deserve to have that white." I'm not. We can hear out the arguments, but I'm not here to make those arguments. I wouldn't agree with most of those arguments, probably. So, but we're here to hear it out and talk about it, and so that would be fun. But race swapping can get a little tricky when you think about going beyond black and white. It can be even that's a larger conversation, I think. But there might be some interesting elements to talk about there. Anyway, yeah, that's really kind of the introduction to the show, and we're really just excited to turn around and get started on digging into the topics. We think we have a pretty good lineup as well for season 2 of this, and then hopefully by then we'll have like enough for season 3. And after that point, we'll have to recircle and see, do we drill down more? Do we have these topics? Because as we go through these big topics, Ralph, I know one of the things we were thinking about is you
Mhm.
can only go through so many big topics before you kind of run out of room a little bit because they're so wide
Mhm.
ranging. But we've already got a good bit generated for a while, and so there's always somewhere we could explore with
Yeah.
this
Don't
topic.
you worry.
Go
I
ahead.
can always come up with more topics of conversation for how race plays out in America and specifically in American cinema. So if you're worried about not having a deep enough well of topics, I can bring some up. I've got them for days. Like I said, I always find myself boring people who I'm talking to at weddings and dinner parties. So I don't have to do that. We can have those conversations here.
And I'm really excited, Raph, that you're so excited to do this because when I reached out, I was like, Raph's already doing the Canon pod, and he's like so busy. I'm like, he's probably gonna be like, that sounds really cool, but yeah, it's like a lot of work. Raph also is just the one that has done this pod so much. He's kind of editing everything, and so it's like, man, that's a lot of workload. I could do it. I'm gonna learn, Raph. We're not gonna let you be the lackey. That will be really bad. More
You're not
problematic.
going to force me into shadow slavery, doing all the work for the podcast and reaping none of the reward. It feels
Yeah,
very American. It would be the most American way to go about this. So if that's what we want to do, we can do it, but we just got to lay it out there that's what's happening. I'll be
we'll
your
let you
little.
know. We'll
I'm
let
not
you
going to
know
say.
if that happens. We don't expect any proceeds from this for a long time, so there will be none of us making
Yeah.
money on the back of anybody. So that's not a problem.
Well, I'm very much so looking forward to it. I feel like you came up with a lot of these topics of conversation, so I'm really excited to dive into them with you and with this new batch of listeners that we are going to be engaging with for this show. Before we wrap up this intro episode, I did want to let folks know that if they want to contact us for the show, we do have an email. We are unfortunately Gmail guys, but that might change at some point. So if you have suggested topics of conversation, movies that you want us to cover, questions for us to answer in regards to any of the upcoming episodes that we have, you can shoot us a message, an email on Gmail. We are movies black and white at gmail.com. Movies black and white at gmail.com. Hit us up, send us your questions, send us your thoughts. Don't send us any hate mail, or maybe do, and we'll read it on air. That could be fun.
Oh yeah, do we have any socials or anything yet that we've made? I know you were setting some of that stuff
Not at the time of this recording,
up. That's no problem. No problem.
but coming soon. So, with that, Jacob, I guess we'll be back soon with our first official episode. Um, Again, audience members, listeners, wherever it is that you're checking us out, definitely make sure that you are hitting the subscribe button so that you are aware when new episodes do come out. Hit us up at the email address. We'll have socials for you soon. We'll be back very soon with that first episode talking about interracial relationships. Can't wait for it. Jacob, anything else before we get out of here and, start talking serious race stuff?
That's great. I'm just glad to get started. This has been something we've been talking about for like months, and so it just feels good to finally be putting this out here, and hopefully people will join us. So thank you for listening to this podcast, and we hope to see you again soon.